Welcome to ShefF1. You could be listening on in one or two different ways. You could be listening on Forge Radio, or you could be listening on our brand new Spotify account. If you just search up ShefF1, then you will find us pretty easily, I'd say. I think I had no trouble. Don't worry, we aren't going anywhere in terms of Forge Radio. We will be continuing to put the show out at the same time, 6 till 7 every Thursday. But for anyone new around here, ShefF1 is Forge Radio's flagship, leading, highest quality and only motorsport programme. I'm Rudy Blank-Brown, and joining me, as per the usual, is Seb Alston and Amy Hamerslagh. There's a camera.
Hello.
Hello.
Wait to the camera, guys. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, cameras, what are they talking about? Well, we now have an Instagram page where we will upload clips and predictions and all sorts to that. You can follow at ShefF1 Podcast on Instagram, because we are a podcast now. We're not a radio program anymore, I'd say.
Yeah.
There's no sort of definition, really. But
it's also because the username ShefF1 was taken. But
that's a good point. But it sounds better than ShefF1 Radio Show. That's a bit too much. But yeah, we had an action-packed Vegas Grand Prix at the weekend, which I think defied expectations.
Yeah,
certainly. Did you both enjoy?
I enjoyed it very much so, especially as I predicted earlier in the year that it was one of my shock predictions was good. It was going to be a good race.
Yeah, it was. I think it was my worst race, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Worst race.
Other than Miami, I think I really weren't looking forward to it. And don't get me wrong, when I got in Friday morning, and I just thought, let's put FP1 on, and it said this session will not resume, and I was like, this is going to be awful. This is going to be awful. But no, I woke up one Sunday. I didn't wake up, I stayed up. But when I put it on for the race, I was really excited, and it definitely defied expectations.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Although I remember you saying to me on the Friday, you saw the black and white statement from F1 Vegas.
No,
and obviously in the previous show we were talking about, well, we don't think anyone's going to die, but it could happen. That'd be awful. Yeah. And you said you saw that, and you're like, oh no! What did we predict?
No, it was worrying. Waking up Friday morning and then seeing on Twitter sort of like the thumbnail tile slideshow previews.
Yeah.
I'm seeing black box. I'm seeing white letters. I'm seeing official statement from the FIA. I'm thinking, oh no,
what's Seb done?
But no, but we were all fine. No one has left us. Thankfully, to my knowledge. Anyway.
Someone did go hospital then.
Yeah,
that's very
Did you
true.
see the images of Lando Norris after his incident?
His voice is.
I know.
His voice.
It was bad when you look at it. To be fair,
the impact was quite severe.
Mm.
We'll talk more about that in due course. I had him down as my pole position candidate, excluding Max.
Yeah.
Although I think I said that genuinely. So but if you're wondering what we're talking about as well, we have. Obviously, the Instagram page. We uploaded our predictions to Instagram for certain categories. We have one for qualifying. I've got them up on my iPad here. So for pole position, let's just react to each of our predictions now.
No.
Amy and Seb both got it correct with pole position.
Yeah.
They both said Charles Leclerc, who put in an excellent lap. Well, for us it was Friday, wasn't it? And then for them it was Saturday.
No idea.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, can I just say, it says excluding Max, but mine would still be Charles, even in the lap.
Well, neither was mine. I mean, I've sort of put brackets Max, thinking, that probably is the correct answer. But I did genuinely think Lando Norris had a decent sort of outside chance. But I was wrong. And then we had the star of qualifying. What were you thinking with Valtteri Bottas?
Well, I think I heard on commentary in FP2, he's light on the wheel, he's going to be great on his tyres.
He weren't awful.
And do you know what? I'm not, I think it wasn't the worst prediction. I think P8, that's pretty, for
That's
Alfa Romeo.
No, that's very good. I'm not criticising you.
Yeah.
You had a bit of a blinder there.
I think also I thought, I didn't want to just, go with Charles or whatever.
Yeah,
I didn't want to copy your prediction. I probably would have gone with Hulkenberg.
Well,
So I'm happy I didn't go for that.
I got the wrong
You picked the wrong Haas
driver.
car, Nico Hulkenberg. Tell us about that prediction.
I mean, we spoke about how Haas are going to be quite good around Las Vegas due to running the hard and quite similar to Ferrari's style.
Yeah.
And obviously Hulkenberg's definitely been the out qualifying driver. He's definitely been the better out the two. So I just thought Hulkenberg, and but clearly I was wrong, and it is Magnussen. Likes to perform in qualifying best at the end of every season, clearly.
He does, yeah. I mean, it was the penultimate race of last year. Magnussen claimed pole position around Brazil for the sprint race. So, take it with a pinch of salt. But that is Haas's best qualifying performance today, which sums up Haas pretty well, I would say.
It was weird though, because I think Magnussen was on their new spec car, but Hulkenberg was like, I feel better in the old spec. So he was on the old spec.
I mean, ultimately they ended up together in the race anyway, I'm pretty sure.
But weirdly, I don't know if now Hulkenberg for Abu Dhabi will be like, I'll go to the new spec, because it was clearly better. But that'll be interesting to see, because you do think Hulkenberg generally had the edge on.
He's had the upper hand over Magnussen all season, definitely.
Yeah, that'll be
Well,
interesting to
Rudy, I think you got the best prediction on that one. Then.
Alex Albon. I mean, we knew Williams were going to be quick going into Las Vegas with their straight line speed, which they seem to have had for years. Even Logan Sargent had an impressive qualifying performance. Alex Albon qualifying P6, starting P5 as a result of Carlos Sainz's crazy grid penalty. In my opinion, we'll talk more on that in a second. But yeah, I said Alex Albon star of qualifying, which I'm pretty happy with.
Who do you think was the star of qualifying?
Pierre Gasly. I think we spoke about it last week. How you thought, especially Alpine, were going to be quite bad around the track, and clearly, according to the standards of his teammate, they should have been. But he did amazing in that car.
Great drive from Ocon in the race as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. He definitely redeemed himself in the race. But according to his teammate, he did wonders with that car. I don't know if there was anything different between the two, but setup wise. But yeah, Pierre Gasly for me.
Yeah, there was something. I think they were testing parts for next year this weekend.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know if that made any effect. Obviously Ocon with the the Verstappen, the little like overtaking into the last lap sort of thing. So that was weird. But Alpine, I'd said they were going to be awful this weekend, and weirdly they were good in both the race and qualifying, both for different drivers. But look at Monza and Baku, which you'd say pretty similar circuits to this one if you could sort of combine them. Yeah, that's been their two worst weekends of the year. Yeah. Whereas this year, if you combine the qualifying and the race of Gasly and Ocon, you might even have a podium there. I mean, it would be tough, but
they certainly surprised everyone with. I think they would have been if obviously Lando Norris, didn't crash out. I still believe that they had stronger pace than McLaren over the course of the weekend. Oscar Piastri with a mental drive. By the way.
Yes.
We'll definitely talk more about that in a second because that was box office. But Alpine really impressing everybody, particularly Gasly in qualifying. And then our final qualifying prediction was the biggest flop. We'll get mine out of the way. I said Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc. He got pole position. I thought he'd bottle it. He didn't.
You got to go big or go home.
Yeah, I thought I might as well annoy Amy with one of my predictions. You said George Russell though.
I did say George Russell, and he pleasantly surprised me. Well,
pleasantly.
He surprised me, and I guess I thought Mercedes were just going to be low at speed, and I thought so with Hamilton going out in Q2, but George definitely was. He proved himself in this race and got fourth, which I think is the highest he could possibly achieve with Charles Leclerc and a Ferrari, and obviously the two Red Bulls. Yeah. And Carlos Sainz in a Ferrari, but obviously with the grid penalty. So I think he did really well. Best
it's weird
possible.
Because his season, you'd say, has been pretty disappointing.
Mm.
But
he'd admit it himself. Yeah. He said it in loads of interviews already that he's had, it's been his scruffiest season to date. That's what he's labelled it. Yeah.
But weirdly in qualifying, he is taking now the head-to-head into the last race. I think it's 11:10. So he could realistically at the end of the year, if he out-qualifies Hamilton in Abu Dhabi, be 11:11. Yeah. Which is, something to take from the year. Obviously, he used to be called Mr. Saturday and things like that. So, but the's still positive signs there. I think there's been creeping doubts into whether maybe is he really World Championship material. But I think he's proven sort of that there are hopes there that he can still carry on. The form we all know that he has.
You said Daniel Ricciardo for your biggest flop of the weekend. Not the weekend, sorry, just qualifying.
I don't think he really flopped, really. He obviously out-qualified. I think it was 15th. He got into Q2, which I think was quite impressive.
He knocks Lando Norris out of Q1, yeah.
So I don't think he would flop. I think it's more for, it was there was a lot of hype about AlphaTauri not really this weekend. Obviously, on paper, it didn't really suit their car. But there's just hype, to do with Ricciardo and Las Vegas and things like that. So I just, I don't know. He didn't really flop, but he didn't really do anything. So I don't think that's it's just a prediction.
Did better than Yuki, obviously, 20th. So.
Yeah, another mistake from Yuki.
Yeah,
another lockup,
really
which
poor.
Is, just sort of, it's like those lingering doubts about him are always sort of there. And, we hype him up sometimes and then, and one weekend he'll just have a,
he had such a strong and consistent start to the season. And then now he's certainly fallen into some sort of obscurity, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks so good next to Nick de Vries, which is
That is a good point. But he was putting in some great results. That car looked really difficult to drive.
Yeah.
The fact that he was, in and around the point so frequently at the start of the season, he was putting on some excellent drives. But you've made a good point that anyone in that car would have looked good next to Nick de Vries. And then Liam Lawson came in. Well, Daniel Ricciardo came in, and then it was Hungary was his first race. It wasn't a terrible start. And then Liam Lawson came in. I wouldn't say wiped the floor with Yuki, but certainly impressed, and I'd say outperformed.
In the races, definitely, I think Lawson is more mature.
Yeah.
I think qualifying, Tsunoda, on that one lap, he can pull it out the bag. And I think he did. I think it was 3-1 or something like that to Tsunoda.
Yeah.
But in the race, I think that's really where he needs to mature.
Definitely.
And obviously in qualifying this weekend, it's just... I don't know. I think these are the doubts that Red Bull, have, and that's why he wasn't ever a contender for that second seat.
No.
So I don't know what's going to happen.
You're right. There was never any talk of Yuki Tsunoda going in and replacing whoever it is in that second Red Bull seat. He's never been deemed ready.
Yeah.
And with good reason, to be fair. We were raving on about him, a few episodes back, right at the start of the season, but now. I don't know. I think I've swung away from the sort of Yuki hype train a little bit. I think as everyone has, really.
It would still be exciting to see if he has that good car beneath him, whether he can make that step up. Because I think when you're a driver in that sort of a lower car, there's not as much sort of inspiration for you to to really pull out the bag.
Yeah.
If you're going into the weekend knowing that you're going to be probably the best you can finish is P15 or something like that in qualifying. Is there really that motivation to really push on and put in a great lap?
I'd say there's something demotivated about being in a sister, junior, whatever you want to call it, being in that type of team for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Is there any escape?
It would feel a bit, Groundhog Day, I guess.
You think Gasly's last year there was pretty poor. And the couple of years before, he was competing sometimes for P4, P5. He was in the top 6 in qualifying loads.
Crazy.
Whereas his last year, the car was, 9th best, 8th best on the grid.
Yeah.
And I think you saw that sort of there wasn't that much motivation for him. So his performance is just it just felt like he didn't really care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's happening to Yuki a bit.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think maybe, the start of the year, the pressure of Nick de Vries' new teammate, that might have spurred him on to get those big performances in. Whereas now it's like there's not much pressure for him to beat Daniel Ricciardo because, it's Daniel Ricciardo. So I don't know. He's sort of in like this middle ground where he doesn't really know. It's just there's not a lot for him to play for. So
we do have an exciting bit of news about AlphaTauri for next season. Nothing confirmed yet, but a name change, and then of course there have been multiple rumors and some stuff confirming that they will be significantly closer to Red Bull in terms of performance next year. Good or bad for the sport, Amy?
I think it's been quite toxic, that relationship, the last few years. We've definitely felt the sense of AlphaTauri cheating. There's been rumours of in certain races. So obviously when Yuki Tsunoda didn't go to the stewards, there was no representation for AlphaTauri when it was against Max Verstappen this season in qualifying, was it? And then there was a race where Yuki retired, and it obviously helped Max because the safety car came out and he was able to catch up. And I never want to say that, like, they are rumours, and you can never say a team's cheating technically. But when they're going to be so good as well, when they're competing with the likes of Ferrari and the likes of Mercedes, who are already struggling against one Red Bull, imagine another one. So it'd be good because will we see another top team? But AlphaTauri, no matter how good their car is, will never be good as the original Red Bull. So it's just going to be, you're going to see constantly, obviously, Red Bull racing winning, but AlphaTauri are just going to be there behind, and they'll never win a race above Red Bull. They'll always come in priority. But you're going to see teams like Ferrari and Mercedes who need help. In all honesty, losing out positions and podiums due to that AlphaTauri team being better. But it'd be good to see another top team, but there's no point when they're never going to be able to flourish on their own. And you're always going to have Red Bull racing as the main priority. So it's kind of toxic, but it'd be interesting to see another top team.
I'll play a little bit devil advocate here. So obviously the rumoured name change is Racing Bull. So it's obviously a lot, I don't like the name, but it's a lot closer to Red Bull. So do you think now that obviously the priority was always Red Bull Racing, and if Toro Rosso or AlphaTauri on top ahead of them, it's not as good for the Red Bull sort of marketing. Whereas if you have Racing Bulls now, which is more marketable for the Red Bull brand.
Yeah.
It's more, familiar. Do you think now that if they are in a position to compete with Red Bull, do you think they'll just sort of let it happen? Because now it's sort of be like, it doesn't matter which of them win because it's all sort of Red Bull branding now. But also I think that it could be good for the sport in a way that, a lot of the time we see young drivers come into that team and they're sort of having to be in cars which are, historically been, bottom of the grid sort of thing. Whereas now we could have younger drivers coming in and competing potentially for podiums, P5, sort of things like that. And it might be, we'll get to see these young talents in a good seat straight away. And we really enjoyed that with Oscar Piastri this year.
Yeah, I loved it.
And, he's come in and he's been in, obviously not at the start of the season, but he's been in a car which has been competing. And so if we now see that young drivers are getting a chance in a good car, could that be potentially better for the sport maybe?
Well, I think the more cars fighting at the front, the better.
Yeah.
Although it is a little bit iffy with, is it just the Red Bull 2.0 with, a slightly slower car for the sake of, the team's integrity? But I'm with you. I would like to see this sort of the promotion of young talent straight to the top of the grid a little bit early, because we've been blessed with Oscar Piastri and some of the performances he's put in this year, providing us some excellent entertainment when we've had a pretty boring season on the whole. And Red Bull, obviously, renowned for bringing in some amazing young talent. They've got Jake Dennis testing for them this weekend at Abu Dhabi FP1. They've got Ayumu Iwasa in the championship fight in F2. They've got, even in F3, they've got exciting. They've even got legacy names. They've got like drivers like Fittipaldi. They've got what's his name, Sebastian Montoya as well.
Yeah.
And so it's I think if any team were to do it, if I could choose any team to have a sort of another team at the front, it would be Red Bull, because I think they would provide the most entertainment out of the lot. Yeah, I guess. So I'm in favour of it. It does seem a little bit dodgy though. I think I don't know. It's kind of like you got Manchester City at the moment with Girona competing at the top of Spanish football, and I don't know, because it's a case if they meet in the Champions League, then what happens? You can't have Girona beat Man City when they are part of the City group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what if it came a trend though? This is where I find it quite toxic and unfair, because Ferrari have a big Ferrari Academy team drivers. You got off Leclerc, Ollie Behrman. I was about to say Bianca. Even McLaren, like, they have a massive academy now, and them two are the teams who are almost following Red Bull's positions. And you could definitely see Red Bull using teams like Haas or Alfa Romeo to their advantage as almost a junior team. And you've seen that in the past, definitely. But I just think it would be really toxic if that was to become a thing. Obviously, is it Alfa Romeo who are going to become Audi?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But Haas had got the engine, and I think it would be really bad for the sport if you could see, them big teams like Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes being able to have a junior team. I think it takes
certainly means
away
they lose
from
identity.
them.
That's for sure. And you look at Mercedes in the past with Williams. You look at Mercedes in the past with Williams. Look at when Lewis Hamilton had to pull out of the Sakhir Grand Prix and George Russell came in. Okay, yeah, sure, Mercedes junior driver, but he was a full-time Williams driver.
Yeah.
And okay, they had the talent pool to bring in Jack Aitken and fill in for him. But that certainly does feel like that there is some sort of network there. You look at Nick de Vries. He drove for Mercedes in Formula E, just before he arrived in F1. He then goes and drives for Williams, and there is that sort of inter-team market of sort of exclusive drivers. Obviously, he then goes on to join the Red Bull family, and not for very long, but it does sort of mean that teams lose their identity, and then other teams that are far more independent than others, say your Alpines, teams like Haas as well. Obviously Haas with Ferrari engines, but they don't really have that much to do with Ferrari per se. Their drivers have been pretty unique in terms of, Romain Grosjean, they got him from Lotus, they got Kevin Magnussen from McLaren, and Mick Schumacher was the only one that was really from that Ferrari talent pool. Okay, they've had Antonio Giovinazzi as like a reserve driver, but that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. So it means that maybe for the fans, the entertainment factor could be increased, more teams fighting at the front. That's what we want to see. But then in terms of for some of the teams, you look at teams like I've just said, like Alpine, Haas, even like Aston Martin. If they continue to regress in performance, this could mean that they are going to be then left for dead. If there's just a bunch of teams teams that have their own sister team fighting at the front. It loses the point of a sister team as well.
Yeah.
If you want to develop young talent, have them in, a car lower down the field rather than throw them in at the deep end. It takes a special kind of driver to do that immediately to perform well at the front of the field. Oscar Piastri is that special kind of driver. You look at Lewis Hamilton when he was thrown into the sport, McLaren right at the front of the field straight away. That sort of special kind of driver. Only took Sebastian Vettel 1 year to jump into the Red Bull, and Max Verstappen as well. Of course, it means it will separate. To use an old-fashioned phrase, it will separate the men from the boys, sort of thing. So yeah, it will be good for entertainment. To summarise this AlphaTauri Racing Bulls thing, we've been talking about it for a while. But yeah, it should be good for the sport. But it might have its downsides on the other teams. Let's move on. Should we do the race predictions, or have we had enough of predictions for now?
We can quickly go over.
Let's quickly go over them. So the podium, I got 2 of 3. Right, Max Verstappen P1, Charles Leclerc P2. I had full faith in Pierre Gasly, finishing P3. Seb was the only one not to have his beloved Gasly in the top 3 predictions, which is a bit wild. But you also got P1 and 2 correct, and then you said George Russell P3.
Yeah, I just sort of thought, he's qualified up there. I didn't really know how, likely it was that overtaking was going to be that easy. Obviously, it looked like, with the big straight, it was possible, but I didn't know how easy it was going to be. And I just thought Russell, he needed a big performance, and I thought he was going to step up. Obviously, he was a little bit unlucky with the safety car, and then obviously the 5-second penalty, things like that. So it could have happened. His opening stint, he was maintaining third. But yeah, I obviously thought Verstappen would come through in the end, and it was close.
It was very close. I mean, it was an excellent fight for the lead.
Race other than Singapore, I'd say.
Yeah.
Closest race with the Red Bulls, definitely.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there were sort of general trends around the track of sort of gaggles of cars being, fighting for one position. Sergio Perez's drive back through the field did look like a pretty tough one, although it looked seemingly quite easy to overtake cars around the Las Vegas circuit. If you're in that sort of gaggle, it took drivers a while to sort of carve back through midfield sort of battles. And so that was really interesting to see that up and down the field there were, multi-car battles for just one position.
I think it was good because there was quite a lot of overtaking opportunities. It was on paper, it was like there's that one long straight and that'll be the main opportunity. Yeah. But it felt like there was overtakes in different corners and things like that. And I think that's what made it the circuit look so good.
DRS was really used to drivers' advantages this weekend.
Yeah, definitely.
And it weren't like too much of, let's say Charles went in front of Max could go and straight attack it. It was used well in the right areas, I thought. So I really enjoyed the DRS.
I thought it was like the sort of right balance.
Yeah.
There's some races you think, what was it? I think it was.
It was the beginning
of
last year.
Was it Saudi?
Yeah, maybe.
And it was just,
race.
We've got our own
ahead,
do-what band, by the way, in the studio. Look at you. Yeah, but there we go. Sorry.
It was like you had to be behind at a certain corner so you could get ahead. If you went ahead of him, you were always going to lose the place back, which that shouldn't be the case. If you overtake someone, you shouldn't immediately know you're definitely going to get overtaken.
Yeah.
So I like that from this weekend. I thought it was good, but yeah, I thought obviously Leclerc, very very strange that he had the pace to overtake Verstappen on his opening stint.
Yeah.
But then in the second stint, Max his tyres he was able to lighten them up and conserve them as well. He did a really good job, I thought.
I think it's just how Leclerc looked after those tyres. I think he certainly held back what he had to fully, offer to the table in that first stint in particular. Verstappen was driving completely fine, and then Leclerc wasn't offering much of a battle. But then before Max pitted, obviously Leclerc made that move, which got everyone excited.
Thought Pierre had such a great qualifying, he was really going to replicate that in the race, but sorry, he didn't.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly looked like Gasly looked like he sort of had the most sustainable and sort of long-lasting pace. I was convinced in that qualifying session that he could genuinely go on and finish on the podium.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it just to sort of get on the Seb Alston hype train, I guess, the bandwagon. Yeah, that's it. But no, he looked really strong, and I knew that George Russell. I'm not just saying this like in like one of them like LeBron James memes type of way. I knew George Russell was going to make a mistake this weekend at some point and wouldn't finish on the podium. We'll move away onto driver of the day now. No, Amy got it correct with Charles Leclerc. Was Charles Leclerc? Oh, hang on, I've got that somewhere. There we go.
Thanks.
Well done, Amy.
I mean,
can that stop now, please? There we go.
There we go. Wow, thanks, guys. No, I just thought that it's quite an easy one to go because obviously it's a fan favourite and it is a fan voted thing. But Sergio Perez was had the most votes, and I was like, I'm not having this. There's not a chance he's winning driver of the day, this fraud. So I went on and I seen that, obviously, I was going to vote for Oscar actually, but I seen that Charles got it by the time I went on the website, and I thought, what a race. I think it was definitely his to win, but that is not his fault with obviously the safety car. I think if it went for the safety car, he may have won it. He definitely had more of a chance, but that last lap just, it was beautiful. Like, he knew what he had to do at the very last opportunity.
Imagine that was for the lead as
Oh.
well. That's so for those of you that somehow didn't watch the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc qualified on pole position and then finished second, but it was because of this amazing move on Sergio Perez on the final lap. Sergio Perez now 2 for 2 in the last 2 races, being overtaken on the final lap. But this time he did finish on the podium. It was a pretty impressive drive from Checo in the end.
It was, yeah. And especially he did have a different setup to Max. So it's not like he was much worse than Max and he let Charles pass. It was just a different setup. It weren't as downforced.
Yeah.
Which is strange because I saw that actually even though he had obviously should have been quicker on the straights, Max Verstappen was still quicker. So I don't know about whether Verstappen's getting better exits and things like that, but still Perez very good drive.
Yeah.
I was so annoyed earlier in the season when he was qualifying like 10th or whatever, getting driver today because he finished second, but I was like. It was just annoying because it was like, wait, what? He just that's what he should do. That's the bare minimum.
But this time, especially with the strategy, I mean, out of nowhere, because of the way in which he pitted at the time he pitted, he just ended up in a podium position just for no reason, and because the pace was really strong as well. He had that sort of 14-second gap, and then and that was with a pit stop, and then obviously the safety car came out and completely changed things up. Sergio Perez could have won that race if it wasn't for the safety car. Obviously it's all if, buts, and maybes, and that didn't happen. The absolute was that Max Verstappen obviously went and won the race. But yeah, Charles Leclerc drive of the day. I think that was a fair prediction.
And what were your thoughts on the starting lap when Max overtook Leclerc, but he pushed him wide, and then he wouldn't give the place back kind of by over the radio, so then he got a 5-second penalty. Do you think that was a penalty?
Well, when the FIA changed the regulation on, the team should decide it themselves rather than us do it, that is such lazy stewarding. It's really lazy stewarding. And it also means that you get Max Verstappen, okay, we'll give him a 5-second penalty eventually when you know that he has the pace to go and create a 5-second gap, or after a pit stop he'll be fine.
Free air to just go and set the pace of the race.
Yeah, no, it wasn't on from Max. He wasn't ahead going into the apex. It wasn't his corner. He forced Leclerc out wide. Okay, he might have had a better launch than Leclerc, but that doesn't mean you can go and barge him out of the way. If it was a case of Max stayed on the track and Leclerc went off, maybe. I could understand why the penalty wasn't as harsh, but both cars went off track. He overcooked the corner. Like, it wasn't a case of Leclerc forced him into making a mistake. He just completely wiped them both off the circuit.
Unless he would have been out the race. So.
And so I think it was it was just your typical Max Verstappen. I don't know why. It was like he was in a championship fight with him. That's the kind of tricks he'd play on Hamilton back in 2021, and it was just unnecessary. I get, you see the gap, you go and make the dive bomb into turn 1, but he could have made that move at any point in the race, really, and he could have done a lot better job of it. Obviously the tyres were cold, there was that oil spill earlier, sort of before the race started. That's what Carlos Sainz down to sort of the reason behind turn 1 being the ice rink that it was. But yeah, no, it wasn't right that he was penalised so conservatively, and there should have been. I don't know how I would have penalised him. A drive-through seems a little bit too harsh, but he should have given the position back, I think, plain and simple.
It would have been interesting to see it because Charles was able to keep pace with Max in that first stint, being behind him, and Max wasn't able to pull away like we usually see from him. If he had been forced to give that position back, do you think Charles maybe could have, in clean air, I think Max would have just made a similar move, to be honest, because we had Leclerc, behind Max, but then Max behind Leclerc with DRS, and that sort of incentive to then go and reclaim the lead like he knows he can.
Yeah.
Go on, Amy.
No, it's just, I think that anger for Charles as well pushed him to be able to make that move on Max before he pitted. I think the reason he gave him a penalty, a 5-second penalty, was I want to prove that I don't need this penalty to get ahead of him. And I've got my skill, and he did that. So I think that would have pushed him. If Charles was in front, he's not really got anything to fight for. He's definitely an emotional driver, Charles. That's why he makes mistakes easily, and he just definitely pushed him to be able to retake the lead, and I'm glad he did in that way, because everyone else would be saying, it's going because of the penalty. No, he did that on his own, so yeah, that's all.
Fantastic. And then Seb, you said Pierre Gasly for your driver of the day prediction.
I saw you guys had put Pierre on the podium, and I hadn't. I was like,
It was a Pierre
got
free
to
for
do
all this
something.
weekend.
I've got to back him in some way. And yeah, it was so sad, so demoralising watching that. Just the way he slipped away on his second stint.
Yeah.
He got I think
especially with Ocon's pace as well. It wasn't
so annoying. But I think it was, so he always had these sort of battery issues. His battery wasn't recharging. So I think he pushed too hard at the start of his, second stint, because he knew he had to take those tyres to the end, and he knew that he was fighting for position now at that point. I think he was having to push a bit too hard. He got massive graining. I think the worst out of any of the drivers on the grid. And I think even with 10 laps to go, he was still, I think, 5th.
Yeah.
Which was, he was still doing a good enough job to get big points on the board to maybe, keep in that fight for P10 in the championship. But his lap times fell off. He was like 2 seconds a lap slower by the end.
Yeah.
And he just had nothing to defend. And it was
Very out of character for Pierre Gasly, falling away in a race like that.
It was. I don't know how much to blame on him and how much to blame on the the battery issues and things like that, and maybe the strategy. I don't know. It's a mix of both. I think it obviously was his fault for pushing too hard. I think if he had managed it better, he could have got away with P7 maybe or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just really disappointing. And if I don't know. Ocon was still I thought still a little bit more impressive on the first stint as well. He was slightly quicker than Pierre, his average lap times. But Pierre was doing enough to keep up with Russell.
Yeah.
So he did have that pace within him, and we know he has that pace within him to stay in that sort of position. So yeah, just really disappointing, and just very sad.
So for anyone new around here, listening or watching for the first time, Seb is an enormous Pierre Gasly fan beyond belief. He's certainly the biggest Pierre Gasly fan I know. Would you go and say the same?
Yeah, I would say so.
Do you know any other Pierre Gasly fans?
I mean, I've seen some on TikTok. Surprisingly, for some reason I'm on Pierre Gasly TikTok every so often, which is really odd. But let's move on. Biggest flop. I'm so proud of my prediction. George Russell, he turned in on me. No, you turned in on him. To be fair to George Russell, he has come out and said that incident with Max Verstappen, which earned him a 5-second time penalty, he
My God.
I think it's just the trial because everyone else is not bothering.
It's 11:30 exactly. So
Yeah, but does it usually? Does
No,
it usually say that?
Sound.
Are you sure?
if he does it again, we'll go. But he's not done it again, so we'll carry on.
If you smell burning,
Exciting
First
scenes.
aider.
Yeah.
I'm a first aider.
she's a first aider. I want the wave back. That's completely disrupted my train of thought.
George
Russell.
Russell
Right.
on Max. What was his comments?
Are we
about?
keeping that in? I don't know whether
Yeah.
we're keeping that. Right, okay. Apologies to anyone listening with earphones, by the way. That must have been horrible. A fire alarm test just went off in the Diamond. That's where we are recording this broadcast. Biggest flop of the weekend, George Russell. Yeah, so he had an incident with Max Verstappen. It was fairly late into the race, I'd say.
Yeah.
Where he just sort of turned in on him. Max was in his blind spot, to be fair, but that's no excuse when you're driving at that higher level. George Russell just turned in on him. Both got damage, and then he fell down the order quite significantly. Max went on to win the race, but George Russell got given a 5-second time penalty and said, "You know what? Yeah, fair enough. I was at fault for that," which I've got to
It's
respect.
rare for him.
It's rare for him, but both Mercedes drivers have been very honest with themselves this season. If you look back to Qatar, Lewis Hamilton going on Instagram and saying, "Yep, sorry guys, that was all me." And no, it's nice to see that there is some maturity on the grid. There were some fiery words all weekend up and down the paddock. If you look back to the Carlos Sainz incident with the drain cover, again, for anyone unfamiliar, in FP1, Carlos Sainz was just driving along normally at a pretty high speed. And then obviously Las Vegas being a street circuit, he ran over a drain cover, which we've seen multiple times in F1. We've seen it at Monaco, we've seen it at Baku. Usually not a big deal, right? It happens.
Yeah.
It happens fairly frequently. It was just unlucky for Vegas for it to happen in the first session.
In the first 9 minutes.
In the first 9 minutes. But then this was a drain cover issue like no other. This cost Ferrari millions in damage. That's what Fred Vasseur is saying anyway. It meant that Carlos Sainz had to take a 10-place grid penalty. Let's just talk about that now. And I think this is a yes or no question. Fair penalty, yes or no?
No.
No.
No. Okay.
What's
Why were you
the
hesitant?
hesitation?
What were you hesitant for?
It's just, at the end of the day, the rules are the rules. So
What
I
can the
understand
FIA
why
do?
the FIA did it. They
But
can't
I don't get it though, because it's in the regulations, so we have to give him a penalty. Don't they decide the
Don't-
regulations?
don't
Or is
you
that
make the
really
regulations?
naive of me to
that's-
say?
yeah, but I think like the regulations are pre-decided. They can't just change it within a race weekend sort of thing. Or they can't. I don't think they can set a precedent of doing that.
Yeah,
I think if it was already in the rules that you can, it's at the the race director's discretion sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then I think he shouldn't have been he shouldn't have received a penalty. But with the rules being what they are, I don't think they should set a precedent that they're just going to change. We're just going to change it. It's not in the rules that we can change it, but we're just going to change it because it's unfair.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, but they should at least hold Las Vegas to account for the incident.
Yes,
I think because if that really has cost Ferrari millions of dollars worth of damage, could Las Vegas maybe at least chip in with some sort of compensation?
Well, if all teams, because apparently 10 out of the 10 teams, 9 of them said that Ferrari he shouldn't have that grid penalty apparently. And the one team that didn't
was Mercedes.
Yeah. Obviously in the title fight for constructors going into the last race in Abu Dhabi. So it was definitely interesting that they were the only team to be able. And Toto Wolff's comments in press conference after he was fuming, and I was like, "Calm down, mate!" Like,
No,
and Fred
was
Vasseur was showing some passion about it as well.
Well, obviously Fred Vasseur will, because obviously that's his car.
team.
That's millions of his, well, not his money, but his team's money, and it seems like a decision that's very unfair against him. But yeah, Toto Wolff was coming out swinging for some reason. But then Max Verstappen, who was on fire this weekend, I have to say, just on and off the track, he was saying if that was one of his drivers, and he's correct. If it was one of Mercedes' drivers, that went over a really rogue pothole cover, not pothole cover, drain cover. That would have been Toto Wolff he would have been distraught. It would have been broken headphones, broken tables, whatever it was, and he would have been demanding.
This is so unfair.
So not right. He was furious. He would have been furious. And but yeah, again, this is all sort of if puts him maybe. There is a chance that Toto Wolff could have been completely fair to his word, and which is unlikely. But yeah. Biggest flops. We'll go back to the predictions briefly. We need to wrap these up soon, though, because we've recorded a lot of stuff just on the predictions. Biggest flop, Max Verstappen. Let's just get that out of the way.
He didn't get pole position, so that's a flop in my eyes.
Alex Albon. To be fair.
Do you know what? I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I don't like personally. He didn't flop. It was just their package. I think both drivers experienced graining. And I think they knew in the race they weren't going to be as competitive as they were in qualifying.
Shout out Logan Sargent, by the way.
Yeah. You scared me for a minute there. But yeah, it's obviously disappointing. I don't think he flopped, but I think that the team flopped.
And then team of the day for all of us.
No.
The less for the race. The less said about that, the better. Let's just get it out of the way because it is on social media. We can't deny it. I said Haas, poor prediction.
Terrible.
You said Williams, Amy, poor prediction. You said McLaren.
Williams is so bad.
Williams is terrible.
Shut up, right? They both did well in qualifying.
This was after qualifying though.
Yeah, but I thought about it's a very similar street circuit to Monaco. Obviously, Monaco's not Monaco. Monza. It's very similar circuit to Monza.
You went. How are you confusing that?
I don't know. It's the M's, and I just thought that we seen that McLaren's not being able to get past Alex Albon, and then they qualified well, obviously in front of the McLarens by a mile. So I just thought it was going to be their weekend. I thought we could potentially see double points for Logan Sargent, especially at his it's his third home race of the season. But I thought it was going to be their race, but clearly I was wrong.
Yeah, not good.
And then we'll talk about McLaren. Your
I think mine was the best of the three.
Yeah, the best of a bad bunch.
Yeah.
Because
only one driver. It's not a team when one of them crashes out in the fourth lap.
Yeah, Lando no race. Am I right?
Oh.
There we go. That wasn't even that loud. I won't play.
You
I
want
won't
to
play
do
it
it
again.
Lando
There we go.
no race.
I've been wanting to use this for ages now. I've got. So we're in the Diamond, by the way, which is a state of the art university building we have here.
Yes.
And back in the Forge Radio studio, we don't have all of these. Well, we do somewhere, but it's not quite as accessible as all these amazing sound effects. So yeah, Lando. One more time, Lando.
Yeah, one more time.
Lando. No race. There we go. That was really loud. Okay. I'll turn that down now so I don't tempt myself. But yeah, McLaren. It was a nightmare of a weekend for them. Really poor qualifying performance. Lando Norris out fairly early into the race. That car is knackered. He was knackered. But then Oscar Piastri, let's talk about that because he was so much fun to watch. Some of the overtakes, what is it with Australian drivers or even just like oceanic drivers? Because we saw that from Liam Lawson around Monza with these amazing overtakes from millions of miles away. Piastri did it. I forgot who it was on, but he did this amazing overtake dive bomb.
Oh, yeah, no, I can't think.
You've got it.
It was incredible. No, I don't.
It was so good. We forgot who it was on because it just doesn't matter because Oscar Piastri was so much better. Anyway, but yeah, he ended up finishing P10 in
with
the
fastest lap of the race.
With fastest lap of the race, which means that McLaren did have some potential that they failed to unlock.
No, their race pace was because he sort of had a weird strategy. He went from hard to hard.
He was in P4
so
at some
annoying.
point. It was really weird.
Yeah, if he had gone from medium to hard, I think he would have got P4.
Yeah.
I think he genuinely would have got P4.
That's quite the statement, Seb.
Well, I think his pace was there. His pace was so much quicker than, I know Gasly, fell away pretty quickly, but his pace, I was comparing it to him and Gasly during the race. Obviously, pretty sad, but he was so much quicker than him, and he was, building a pretty big gap as well.
Yeah.
And I think he didn't need to change tyres. I don't think in the end.
When I heard on commentary that he needs to go in again, and he was easy in P4, he was creating the gap like you said, and then they said no, he needs to go in the pits again. I was like, oh, for God's sake, McLaren, why couldn't they have done the medium hard or hard?
Yeah.
Because his tyres weren't really falling away. He hadn't got significant graining at that point when he had to make the change. So, yeah, just a bit of a... I understand why obviously went them hard to hard because he had to pit pretty early.
Yeah.
So I understand that, but, it was committing then to a 2-stop in a race where, he didn't really need to do a 2-stop.
No.
So, it's unlucky, but also sort of poor strategy. But
he did benefit under one of the safety cars.
Yeah, still an incredible, race pace from him.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, where could Norris have gotten if he had stayed in the race? We know he's pretty good with his tyres. How high up could he have finished as well? So it could have been 4th or 5th or something like that for McLaren, which would have been incredible and made me look like a genius. So,
Bloody Lando Norris. But to be fair, I do want to say that is Lando's first DNF since Brazil last year, and that's like the longest stint for a race driver on the current grid other than Max Verstappen. So it was about time, I think.
And it wasn't really his fault. It was a bit, I think he could have maybe controlled it, but I think they were saying he went over a bump, which you can control, but if you're so unexpectant of it, then
Small walls. I'm so glad for that runoff.
They did say that bump was really dangerous, though, didn't they? Someone came out and said that they should probably do something about that before they go back there next year.
But
that bump
again,
in particular.
No one else crashed. So.
No, good point. Excellent point.
But I'm so glad for that runoff section and where he did it because if it weren't there, there was big impact already and he had space to slow down. So imagine if he just went straight into that wall, it would have been
because you heard his voice
worse.
and he was sounding like shaky and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously went to hospital for a little while.
Yeah. Well, he was sent to hospital and then he was sent to the medical room and then sent to the Las Vegas University Hospital. I mean, imagine we're university students, right? Imagine if we weren't doing journalism, we were doing
medics.
medicine.
We have some stuff in the medical school next year.
Do we?
Yeah, well, I do anyway. I don't know if you do, but for like data-driven
semester.
storytelling or something like that.
Oh.
So I've got some stuff in the medical. Imagine I walk in there, Joe Granew's in there.
Yeah, imagine.
Get him on ShefF1.
Sheffield
if you want
Grand
Barry.
Prix.
Yeah, I will give you these antibiotics, but could you just do us a big favour?
Autograph.
I've done you a favour. You do me one. I think.
Yeah,
it's
make him sign an autograph, but then you unfold the rest of the paper and it's a contract committing to one ShefF1
every
broadcast.
episode ever.
Every episode ever. Imagine that. That'd be pretty good.
Well, it'd get a bit boring overall, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if he could provide the most insightful race weekend out.
We wouldn't understand it though. I don't think.
What do you mean? What? Because he'd just be so in depth.
Yeah.
We got to get to know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But we could learn to be like strategists.
We could be the Alfa Romeo exclusive podcast.
Yeah.
Get VB on. He could give us free calendars.
Probably the worst thing
I'm
to be.
quite tight with an Alfa Romeo. What's he called? Engineer, because he was the one who I spoke to on the pit lane.
What?
And he was the one I got to speak to on the pit lane when I went Monza, and he was the one who recorded the whole of the pit lane for me dead clearly. And
Oh right.
I got one of the. I'll call him. Don't worry, guys.
You didn't get his number, did you? Oh, why are you getting our hopes up like that, man?
No,
failed.
but I've got that charisma with the Italians clearly. So
Obviously.
that was the best video I've ever got.
What are you searching up? Are you searching up the
I was
video?
going to look at the video. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
What?
Oh, that is
We
good.
could insert it.
We can. Yeah.
There we go.
ShefF1
Best
was
mates
me.
with Alfa Romeo.
Brilliant.
There we are.
I've got pictures of him actually because I was like, "Can you take photos for me?" That was him. So we can get him on the
Seems like-
podcast.
You
I'll
should have
just
got his
send-
number.
I'll just send his a picture of him going, "I've got a photo of you on my phone. Can you come on my
Exactly.
podcast?"
that'd be pretty good though, because I mean they do have good stories to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is any of this staying in? By the way, are we
We'll
going to keep?
find out.
We'll see. We'll see what the timings are like.
Let's move away from our predictions now. If you want to laugh about them even more, then do check out our Instagram ShefF1
I'm sure we'll have
podcast.
some funny ones.
Yeah.
Abu
next
Dhabi, no.
Abu Dhabi,
Can't
yeah.
think.
I'm just thinking now we're going to have to do more. So
I know,
yeah. But obviously Las Vegas as an event as a whole generated lots of conversation for a multitude of reasons. Now, none of our hopes, well, yours actually they were very high, your hopes going into the weekend, but me and Amy and a lot of people were thinking that this could be an absolute travesty of an event. And it didn't make a brilliant first impression. Obviously, the Carlos Sainz and drain cover incident, and then fans who paid to watch the practice sessions in the grandstands got 9 minutes of cars on track, and they didn't get a proper refund. They're now taking the Grand Prix to court, and okay, it's not a great start, but it wasn't totally excruciating like Miami has been in terms of all the media stuff. Okay, we had that really weird Hunger Games-esque opening ceremony on all the big plinths where none of the drivers took it particularly seriously. Max Verstappen for the entire weekend, 99% event, 1% race, you know.
Yeah, it's the National League and Monaco's the
National
Champions
League,
League.
Monaco's the
And then he
Champions
got
League.
dressed as Elvis.
And then,
Oh,
he got
best.
dressed as Elvis. Viva
Singing
Las
on the
Vegas on the
radio.
radio, yeah. He said something, and then it was the answer that he gave. Okay, is it a good track, Max? You like driving around it? No. And then that was pretty much the end of that. And yeah, so it wasn't off to a great start. But then we had a decent qualifying session. Obviously, Charles Leclerc on pole.
Pretty mixed up grid, sort of.
Very mixed up grid.
I thought that was exciting.
Didn't get to expectations. Seen both Williams in Q3, so it was definitely a good qualifier.
It also put doubts at the track being too cold to bed as well. It looked pretty okay to drive on. Obviously, there was a couple of mistakes here and there, but obviously, no more than that you would get around any other track for the first time, I'd say. And then the race itself, I have to say, was one of the races of the year. It's put one of my predictions at the start of the season to absolute shame, but Las Vegas was an entertaining race. I want to put this question forward to you both, and this is quite a loaded question. Let's weigh up the pros and cons of the race, or of the weekend as a whole, and then make improvements. Do you know what I mean? If that makes any sense. So how would you improve the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Because obviously it wasn't perfect. Let's talk about each sort of individual thing let's talk about the refund, okay? Would you have given them the full refund because they only saw 9 minutes?
I mean, if it was from my pocket, no. But yeah, I mean, I think there should be. I think it should be sort of something when you maybe buy the ticket. That that you're taking a bit of a risk if you're buying the ticket. Maybe I don't know if that was already.
That seems a little bit unfair.
That's out of FIA's
It's like when you go to a football game, one of them might have a heart attack on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, it's quite an extreme example, but it's you can't buy a ticket for anything and expect it to fully go ahead. It would be unfair to sort of say, here's your ticket.
Technically, in the terms and conditions.
You might have a wonderful weekend, or it might be awful. I think, and then the refund that they gave him, they don't really lose out much money. $200 store voucher. Realistically, in Las Vegas, that's what, a t-shirt and a hat, probably.
I think one thing they could have helped is the timings of it. So I know a lot of people just didn't want to wait around for FP2 because it was so cold and it was so late. And obviously that was to adjust to the European time zone, which you don't have to do. If you're an F1 fan, you're going to get up for F1. And
it's not really fair having, obviously we've got 3 races in America. You might as well just go all the way and make it totally American-centric.
Yeah.
It was unfair forcing fans to sort of, especially when they cancelled it as well. But even still, if you're sort of having to watch FP1 when you've bought tickets to be there and it's 1:30 in the morning, that isn't right to me, and it shouldn't. It's not fair on the drivers either. You look at the press conferences and the interviews that they had after the race. Daniel Ricciardo, that was a really hard watch because he said it himself. He was really delirious, and it's like, well, should you really be driving a car
at 200
mile an hour? In that sort of state around a circuit that you've never driven around before. It wasn't the safest way to host the race, all for the sake of European times as well. I believe. I think it was Toto Wolff that said that would agree with us on this.
No one's awake in Europe, so people were trying to complain about the obviously FP1 not going ahead, and how would people waking up in Europe? And he was like, "Well, no one's even watching it in Europe."
I was going to say,
I was.
Yeah, you were, but I'll hold up my hands up and say that I found out about all this the following morning.
Yeah.
So
But he is right. but I was up.
Yeah.
So I wasn't upset about it. Obviously, if something happens, then something happens. I just went straight to sleep. But yeah, I think that's quite a harsh comment to make. Don't saying, oh, people weren't up. People do get up for it, and that's trying to.
But I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
I think you should definitely prioritise the fans that are there at the event because you can't expect people to be in the grandstand at 1:30 a.m. in the middle of a desert when it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
You know. And then not even fully refund them as well when the event doesn't quite go ahead. That's on them. The drain cover is not the fans' fault. The drain cover, it's not really the event organisers' fault. But then the way in which they had to go and inspect every single other drain cover around the track, putting loads of tarmac over it and stuff like that. I mean, it looked pretty shoddy if you ask me. The way that they were dealing with it, but obviously they were under time constraints, so
Well, what I think about it is that 90% of the races are for us. We can watch them. They're at comfortable times. Maybe Japan might be the only one where we're like
Australia as well.
Yeah, and it's a bit early in the morning, but that's fine. And they want to grow it in America. That's like the whole thing about having it in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
It's not to grow the European market. The European market is already there.
No, you make an excellent point.
So why are you trying to isolate the Americans from being able to watch it when
in
it's
their own
their
country?
race?
Yeah,
IndyCar is still number one
Exactly.
for motorsport in America. So if they want to make F1 this ultimate sport there, then they've got to adjust to them, and in a way they have been, but they shouldn't be in a race in America. Why are you not doing American time zone?
Yeah.
If I want to watch F1, I'll wake up and watch it as a European fan.
It's
Because
crazy.
I've got plenty of races in the year to be able to watch it within the day.
If you flip it round as well, say how they're trying to grow American football here. You know how they use the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to show American football games. Why would they get people in at 2 a.m. for the sake of an American audience to go and watch American football in a football stadium? It
No
makes
one would go.
absolutely no sense. Oh, because no one in America's awake of this. So none of it makes any sense.
It doesn't, like, we're all big football fans. If the World Cup was in somewhere like that and we have late night games, we're going to get up and watch it if we want to watch it, and that's just the choice. And think about the American fans who are going to have who are massive F1 fans and going to have to watch Europe, and obviously it's not adjusted to them, so they're having to get up at 6 a.m. Australian fans going to be having to get up early, and if they're actual fans of it, then they'll watch it, and I just don't think it's fair.
Well, I think pre-season in football, when we're like when Man City are playing in America and it's like 2 a.m. I'm like, this is quite exciting. It's so infrequent that I don't mind doing. If it was every single game, like it would be a drag. But like, because it's so infrequent, it's like something like you can make like a sort of event of it or something like that. It's quite exciting, and because it's so infrequent, I don't mind getting up at 2 a.m. or whatever like that to watch an F1 race if it's not every weekend.
Yeah.
So it's just silly. I don't understand the point of it at all, because it's not like it was like getting up at like 10 a.m. or something like that. It was still 6 a.m. in the morning, the race. Like,
it wasn't exactly optimal UK viewing times.
No one had it in a great apart from I think Australia.
Could they not have had it in the morning? Maybe say what time is 10 a.m. Las Vegas time here? Does anyone
8
know?
hours ahead. We're 8 hours ahead. So
6 o'clock in the evening. That surely seems
Perfect.
far
But
more
they
logical.
wanted the lights, didn't they?
I suppose they wanted it to be a night race. Yeah.
Have Las Vegas to be able to have the day, so when tourists are going, I guess they can't shut roads off, and they had to during the race. So I do get nighttime, but just do it in like a reasonable time. Literally, like goes dark early now. I'll get up. Don't worry about it. No, it's fine.
It's a weekend as well, so it's not
exactly. I've got nowhere to be.
Week racing or something like that. But I think that's one way they can improve it. Other than that, though, I'm not. Maybe ticket prices.
Ticket prices weren't great. And then one thing I do want to touch on as well. I saw loads of TikToks about people just trying to walk through Las Vegas. I mean, obviously there were some people trying to film the track, but they were being threatened with jail time if people were sort of caught. So if because obviously some of it was like a shopping mall, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or something.
Going down the escalators.
The escalators, yeah, that's it. So around the Las Vegas circuit, obviously with the nature of it being a street circuit, there's obviously public access to different areas of Las Vegas around the circuit, if that makes sense. And there was there's people, multiple videos of people walking around just, what would be a normal pedestrian walkway around the track in any other time of the year, and then if people were caught lingering, it was a case of there was like security guards forcing people to continue walking. It sounds really weird, and like I'm being quite uptight about it, but people were being threatened with jail time if they were sort of caught sort of watching the race through like a crack in a fence or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, is it really acceptable to have a race and then I don't know how to put it, but in case of like with the hotels and stuff like that, had viewed the track, they were forcing hotels to ramp up the prices by however many thousands of dollars, and then stuff like that bridge that we talked about last week, taping over the glass windows on this bridge and stuff like that. it's sort of it's a bit naff, really. You know, going to all these ridiculous measures to stop people from watching F1. Can you really have a street circuit race where you can't, you know, make it when you can't? Well, no, not like that. But I mean, like, it wasn't ready. They didn't really factor in people just going about their day, walking around the track. Obviously, because it's in the middle of a city and one of the busiest cities in the world. It's like they just didn't factor it in altogether. And so I don't know. It's doesn't really make too much sense for me.
No, I agree. I think if you're gonna have like a race in New York, I would love that. Like, but you can't shut down New York for the day just for the sake of an F1 race. And I definitely didn't factor that. And I seen a video of a security car going, "Well, you should have bought a ticket. Should have bought a ticket.
Yeah, have you got $2,000 to spare?
Yeah, but that's just that easy. But if you're on holiday, people go to Las Vegas not just for F1, just because it's on that weekend. And I would factor that in. I wouldn't particularly want to go that weekend, but some people didn't even know that, so they've gone. They want to go about the day, and obviously it's a very cool thing to see, so of course people are going to want to look. And I just it's not fair, and apparently they have lowered the prices already for next year's race.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good.
$250 or something for $250 for general admission.
That's really good.
Which is really good.
Actually, that's really good. $250. That is cheaper than Silverstone.
That's cheaper than Monza.
Monza.
Similar to Monza. Yeah.
Is that worrying though?
That's going to be the only ticket price that has decreased in recent time, because they seem to be getting more and more expensive. I remember, you know, whenever I'd be looking at ticket prices, I felt like I, wanted to maybe branch out to somewhere in Europe, because obviously Silverstone's now you're looking at £300 for a general admission ticket. It's extremely expensive. You'd be better off getting a plane to Barcelona and then getting a general admission ticket for maybe less than €100. And so, or at least
as well.
Hungary, like the classic one. It's like that's the cheapest one.
That's the cheapest one. Spa's usually quite cheap as well. Yeah. Whether you get to watch a race or not, that's up in the air. But we'll move on to sort of the more showbiz side of things. Did you watch the Bruce Buffer grid announcement thing when he was shouting out all the drivers' names?
Yes, and the Checo Perez.
Perez was.
That is.
Have you not seen it? So
I saw
Bruce Buffer the
might just go straight up to him and like.
Yeah, that was really weird.
Is that when they were like getting in the cars and stuff?
I think so.
Yeah, it was the drivers' parade.
It was certainly.
I think everyone was confused because they thought they were going to get interviewed by him.
Yeah,
when it was meant to be.
Was that better or worse than the Miami unveiling? Because that was a hard watch as well.
It was.
Although the guy in Miami got all the names right. To be fair, Bruce Buffer struggled with I think was it Charles Leclerc or something like that. Like really sort of over-exaggerated on the pronunciation.
I hate how they call him Chuck Leclerc.
Chuck Leclerc. Oh, that
I was
made me
watching.
sick.
Did you watch Biff?
Piff the Magic Dragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny. It's a little segment, but when he kept going, it's Chuck, and he's like, it's Charles, and he's like, no, it's Chuck, and he's like, it's Charles. And it was just like, just say Charles.
I think that's just part of the act.
Yeah, it was.
But again, these are all very minor things. But you know what? So let's just sort of conclude on the Vegas GP. It certainly exceeded expectations.
Yes. Yeah.
It wasn't as bad as we all thought it was going to be. In fact, it was quite good. Okay, I'm going to say that under my breath because I was so passionate about it being terrible at the start of the year, and I've been proven completely wrong.
I think the
well done F1, you've outdone yourself. Okay, you've proven me wrong. If that's
I think the most promising thing as well was that it was to do. I thought was the circuit. Yes. I think that the layout of it helped it. So it's not like some races where you have a one-off sort of thing.
Yeah, second most this season.
Like sometimes Monaco. Sorry. Like, this year was exciting, but, in other years it can be really boring because of the circuit and you can get one-off things. But I felt like this one, it wasn't to do with the rain. It wasn't to do with really the tyre temperature, things like that. Yeah. It was just the circuit was just good enough. And it was an exciting layout. It was fast. It was exhilarating. There were overtaking opportunities. It was quite difficult to follow sort of things like that, but it was still, you could overtake. So I thought that's promising for the next 10 years that we're going to have it for. I thought it was it lived up to my hype anyway.
No, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm looking forward to Las Vegas next year.
Yeah. Well, when they've ironed out everything as well, you think this
$250 a ticket? We should go. By the way, by that point we'll have plenty of student loan that is amassed by that point, so we'll
have millions of followers. And
we'll have loads of followers.
Pay us to go.
They will. We'll cover it.
We'll be on F1 TV.
Exactly.
Interviewing the drivers. We will be going Sergio, Checo, Perez.
That was so awkward. Just the way he sort of stood there. Hi, you know.
Where do I go?
Thank you so much for listening to ShefF1. I think we're going to round the show out now. If you want some preview of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix that's happening this weekend, then you can go check us out on Spotify because we have run out of time on our Forge Radio slot. We would have done it next week, but then obviously it's a double header this week, so we can't do that. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Do check us out on Spotify and Instagram, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, soon to be TikTok. We're going global, baby. And yeah, do tune in next week after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Same time on Forge Radio, 6 till 7. And on Spotify, it should be uploaded at around 6 p.m. on Thursday as well. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.